What's up guys, my name is Ace, and now that we have a bunch of new melee weapons added to the game with Season 2 Reloaded, and also with Season 2 Reloaded there were a few melee changes which I have already covered, it is time for an updated melee comparison to see which one of these is best, at least depending on the situation, since there isn't necessarily a best all-around option for melee weapons. And without further ado, let's just dive right into this with the standard attack. For those that aren't aware, melee weapons have a standard attack, which is the one you'll see if you just use the standard fire button for a weapon, or there's also a heavy attack option, which we'll look at in just a little bit, and that's where you have to essentially like aim down sight and then release. But we'll get into that in a little bit. When it comes to the standard attacks, damage-wise, out of the new melee weapons, the katana, the bow staff, and the sai are all going to be a one-hit kill in core game modes, whereas the nunchucks are a two-hit kill. We deal 90 damage with those. As for our pre-hit delay, this is the amount of time it takes from the moment you press the button to attack the enemy player to the moment you actually get that first hit on them, or the kill on them in the case of the one-hit kill weapons, of course. And as you can see, the power drill is still the clear winner here at just 175 milliseconds. Out of the new ones, the bow staff is on the slower side here, whereas the others are pretty much just standard. And now let's get into our time between two hits, which is very important for two-hit kill melee weapons, of course. But even for the one-hit kill melee weapons, this can be important if you're dealing with multiple enemies and you need to get that follow-up hit on the second guy as quickly as possible. And once again, the power drill is still the clear winner in this area. However, the nunchucks are just behind that at 500 milliseconds, so quite good for a two-hit kill melee weapon. You will get that follow-up hit quite quickly. And it's worth noting, the sai are also quite impressive here at 550 milliseconds, and that is the best out of the one-hit kill melee weapons. Then on the opposite end of that, the bow staff has the slowest time between two hits at 850 milliseconds, so there is quite a long delay there, and that's definitely something to be aware of. Now, one of the most important stats here when it comes to melee weapons is our lunge range, so let's have a look at those, keeping in mind this is updated, and the combat knife, the baseball bat, and the power drill all recently got buffed. These are the post-patch values. And as you can see, the bow staff now has the best lunge range out of all of the melee weapons in the game at 2.3 meters. Unfortunately, the sai and katanas are pretty bad here at 1.6 meters and 1.7 meters respectively. Those are the worst in the entire game when it comes to lunge range, whereas with the nunchucks, these are pretty much just average at about 2 meters. Now finally, for the standard attack, it is important to take a look at our maximum hit angle. So this is how far off target you're able to be aiming while still locking on and getting that kill as long as you're within the lunge range. And this time around with Black Ops 6, it looks like they're just set on keeping these identical for all of them at 30 degrees. And there we go, those are all of the important stats when it comes to the standard attacks. And I would say out of the new melee weapons, the big standout here is the bow staff, largely just due to that great lunge range combined with the fact that it's a one-hit kill melee. Sure, your follow-up hits are going to be a little bit on the slower side, that pre-hit delay also a bit on the slow side, but I think it makes up for that when it comes to its excellent range. Additionally, while the nunchucks are a solid option as far as the two-hit kill melee weapons go, at the end of the day, the power drill after the buffs is actually a little bit better. Now, of course, that's just looking at the standard attacks though. Now let's move on to the charged attack or the heavy attack, whatever you want to call it. This is the type of attack where, at least on controller, you hold the aim down sight button to sort of charge up the attack, and then from there you can strike. And with this, no matter which melee weapon you're using, the charge attack, if it has one, will be a one-hit kill. During this time, while you have it charged up, you can't sprint at all, so that is one downside to it. Also, once it locks on and that animation has begun, both you and your victim will be locked in place, so your victim can't shoot back at you or anything. They're locked into that animation, kind of like a mini finishing move. And in that time, it's possible for the victim's teammates to save them if they kill you before you deal that finishing blow. So there's definitely some risks to using this, while the upside to this is the enemy that you're fighting against can't fight back while locked into this animation. Their teammates can, and you're going to be locked into this much longer than the standard attacks. So let's dive deeper into the stats of this. And when it comes to that charge time, or how long it takes to complete that initial animation before you're ready to attack, interestingly, with the nunchucks, based on my testing, there's no charge time attached to this at all. So that's a huge benefit to using the charge attack with this. It basically instantly locks the enemy in place the moment you initiate this attack. Whereas the power drill is also great, and surprisingly, the bow staff is really good in this particular area, and that's a bit surprising since the other timings are quite slow on this overall. The next set of timings to look at here is our time to kill. If you're already charged and you release this, how long does it take in the animation before the enemy is dead? So basically, how long do his teammates have to potentially save him before you get that finishing blow on them? And the cleaver is still on top here at 550 milliseconds, but it has a very slow charge time to begin with. The power drill comes in second, and just behind that, the nunchucks are quite fast here at 650 milliseconds, which when you combine that with the 0 millisecond charge time, and we look at our overall time to kill if we just hit the charged attack immediately when we see the enemy, so we're not pre-charged here, the nunchucks are the clear winner here due to the fact that there is no charge time that I can measure at least. And from the moment you press that button to the moment they're dead, this is just 650 milliseconds, which is drastically faster than something like the katana or the baseball bat. So it's looking really good for those nunchucks. However, we still have to look at our lunge range, since for many of these at least, it's going to be a bit different. Although, surprisingly, for the bow staff, the sai, and the nunchucks, our lunge range with our charge attack is the same as our standard attack, but with the katana, it is different at 2 meters. And then with the baseball bat, cleaver, and power drill, our charge attack lunge range is 2.1 meters for all of those. And then finally, when using this charge attack, our maximum hit angle does increase up to 55 degrees for all of these melee weapons, so you don't have to be quite as precise as you would have to be with a standard attack. And at the end of the day here, when it comes to charge attacks, I would say while the power drill is still solid, the nunchucks are the clear winner here. And if you are going to be using those nunchucks, the charge attack is absolutely the way to go in most situations. And with all of that out of the way, it is important to take a look at mobility as well. However, Treyarch has decided to take the approach of keeping our movement speeds identical across all of the melee weapons, and it's no different from the new ones they added. And the reasoning behind this is they don't want you to be selecting your melee weapon based on how quickly you can get from point A to point B. They want your selection to be open when it comes to that, so you don't feel like you can't use certain melee weapons because they don't move as quickly as others, or you kind of feel like you need to run the one that moves around the fastest. And since we have that dedicated melee slot, so therefore we always have a melee weapon that we're selecting, unless we decide to use that fly swatter wildcard, they want to make sure that your selection isn't going to be limited by the mobility of that melee weapon. So I understand the approach. I also really liked how Modern Warfare 3 handled it last year, where we did have different movement speeds, and it would create a bit more variation. You could have a melee weapon that was quite weak power-wise, but it moved around really quickly, or you could have one that had an insane lunge range or something, but the downside was it was hard to close that distance because it had slower mobility. So I do see the pros and cons here, but I think since we do have that dedicated melee slot, I actually agree with Treyarch on this one. I think it makes sense to keep mobility consistent across the board, and make sure you're aware of that when making these selections. Mobility doesn't matter since they're all the same. So with all of that out of the way, what is now the best melee weapon in the game? Well, obviously it is going to be coming down to preference to a degree, but in my opinion at least, if you're using standard attacks, the bow staff is now the best, largely just due to that lunge range. That lunge range is really nice. However, if you're planning on using that charged attack, the nunchucks really stand out here, and they're not bad at all in this area, so you may want to try those ones out as well. Now, of course, those are just my opinions though, and I'd love to hear from you guys in those comments down below. Now that you've seen all these updated stats, what is your favorite melee weapon to use in Black Ops 6? If you enjoyed this video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.